Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective on a somber yet in some ways kind of bittersweet day. Sweet because we are remembering the life of somebody who has touched many of ours. Mr. Danny Tanner himself, our TV dad from Full House, Bob Saget. I was hoping Mark Pellegrino would be here because he's often able to host with me on Mondays. And unfortunately, he couldn't make it today and sadly, because I wanted to ask him maybe what he knows about the sitcom world, if he maybe crossed paths with Bob Saget or any other thoughts he had that would spring up from today's topic. But he cannot make it here today. So I will be doing this solo. I need your help. Please get involved in the chat. And I'll say this. Bob Saget, what really made him happy, what he would really want would be for you to send a lot of super chats. Okay, at least he certainly would not be opposed to it. That I think safely assume. So Full House was a show that was born in 1987, as was I, and I was growing up in somewhat of a developing country. I think Israel still kind of was, everything had sort of a 5-year lag. So like TV shows that we were watching in the late 80s, early 90s were often like 5 years old. And so I actually got to watch Full House. Like it arrived, it first was syndicated in Israel, kind of in real time. In a way, I was watching the show from its inception, from its first episode onward. So I thought I was the same age as Stephanie on the show, but I was actually, in reality, the same age as the Olsen twins, baby Michelle. Now, the thing with live action shows is, unlike cartoons, they don't remain the same age. So we get to kind of watch them and grow up alongside them. And, that can be kind of endearing. And of course, it makes us more emotionally invested in this world that the TV show depicts. And so what was it about Full House that really spoke to me as a kid growing up? I think there's sort of a negative reason, which is to say there were negative things about the environment I was in, to which Full House was an antithesis. And then there's also just very generally positive things about the show that would possibly appeal to many people from many different environments. So I was growing up in a very strict religious environment, being told a very literal, fundamental interpretation of the Old Testament. So this was, religion was not something to comfort you. It was not something to enjoy occasionally. It was very literal, very fundamental. And I was basically being told, here is your life, and here is going to be your life after death. And here are the commandments and all of that. And then kind of what TV kind of offered to me when I was able to watch it was characters and a world where none of that applied. And especially Full House, I think, to me, just represented like just generally happy people dealing with problems and solving those problems and just generally enjoying their life. So these were characters who knew, who never spoke about God, never spoke about duty and commandments. And also, growing up in Israel, there were suicide bombings every few weeks or month or two, like just ongoing cycle of violence and strife, war constantly being waged. And, here were characters that never heard of any of that were unconcerned with all of that. They were dealing with very first world problems, and first world problems can be very traumatic. I mean, the show begins in the aftermath of the death of the mother in the family, and her widower, Danny Tanner, is left with an infant and 2 children. So 3 girls to raise, and his best friend and his brother-in-law, Uncle Jesse, they move in temporarily to help him raise the kids. And of course, they end up just kind of never moving out. And so it's called Full House for that reason. It's a very full house. It gets more full as the years progress. Uncle Jesse gets married, and his wife moves in with him into the attic of the house, and they have 2 kids, twin boys. So it's quite the full house. And don't forget the dog Comet as well. So I think to me, the show, it depicted just a bright, very reality-based kind of pursuit of what life can be. People choosing their own values and pursuing them. And, as I'll get into later in the episode today, I can definitely see people criticizing Full House, criticizing sitcoms, criticizing modern TV on very legitimate grounds. But I think we can't disagree with one another's affinity for certain art. All we can really do is ask, like, well, what is it about this art that appeals to you? And that's kind of what I'm trying to explore here today. And maybe it's relatable to some of you because, like me, many of you grew up with Full House or enjoyed it or something similar to it that you can relate to my experience. So in the show Full House, the dad, Danny Tanner, played by Bob Saget, he's just like one of these very positive characters. Like he's wholesome, but not in a like religious dutiful way where like he expects like you may never break these rules. Like you must be wholesome. It's not like that at all. It's just like this very kind of benevolent, voluntary way to be. Just kind of like I'll say kind of intrinsically benevolent, if I can use that word. And he's I mean, his character is, I think, rightfully kind of universally loved by so many people. I mean, I don't know if universally and so many people is an oxymoron, but virtually everyone has an affinity for this character, Danny Tanner. He is the host of a morning TV show, Wake Up San Francisco. And again, from where I was coming from, because you might say, oh, these morning shows are just so two-dimensional and fake. And I'm not saying I disagree per se. I'm just saying kind of from where I was coming from in my childhood, this to me was heaven on earth. This was, this was a person able to be on TV in the morning and host a show and provide for himself and his family. Just something very, very Aristotelian about all of that, if I can use my mature vocabulary. And the other two men living in the house, Joey and Uncle Jesse, they went on. They founded an advertising agency. And again, you can say advertising is about as low as you can sink in life. Some people see it that way, and I'm not entirely disagreeing. It's just that from where I was standing, that was a very cool way to make a living. So, I mean, you can kind of see the point I'm trying to make here. It's that you can sort of look back at these early life values in art and entertainment and kind of see why it spoke to you the way that it did. And I don't think there's any reason to ever turn your back on that. I mean, you might look back at some of the art you grew up with and maybe criticize it and say, like, here's what was wrong with it or something like that. If I suppose, but to throw it under the bus completely, I think is what I consider to be monstrous. I really don't like. I mean, this goes far beyond Full House. I really hate when people kind of laugh at the stuff that they enjoyed growing up or in their adolescence. Like, to me, that is like the most, gripping of values when you're young, when you really love something, music or TV or movies or entertainment, books. That's the real deal. So, I mean, to kind of mock that later and to throw that under the bus to me is just a very ugly thing. So I hope I am never caught doing that. So I don't watch Full House anymore, but I definitely continued watching it well into my teenage years. And I was not like some, well-behaved kid who like just wanted to watch wholesome TV. I was a very edgy, very troubled teenager who acted not in a way that was conducive to investing in my future. But still, anytime Full House was on, like reruns, I would put it on. This is, in the early and mid 2000s. And people thought that was weird. They were like, he's serious. He is seriously watching Full House. But I mean, I just loved it. It just, to me, it's just this uplifting show. And, old habits die hard. I don't watch it anymore because I think I watched the show so many times that like, I've seen them all the episodes too many times that it's just not interesting to watch anymore. Similarly with the comic collection Calvin and Hobbes, it's like I went through those books so many times growing up that I just feel like I'm never going to be able to read it with a fresh set of eyes again. But yeah, I definitely continued watching Full House, at a time at an age when, as I was approaching, adolescence, and I was kind of being told like, okay, you need to really double down on your religious studies and go down that path and really think about the Institute of Higher Learning, where you're going to continue your studies. And then obviously, as you exit your teenage years, think about getting married and having kids and sending them to repeat the cycle. I was choosing, Danny Tanner and Full House and watching sitcom reruns over all of that. And I mean, today I understand much more why those sitcoms meant so much to me. So, if Mark Pellegrino could be here right now, I would ask him. In a way, this is it's like we're commemorating Bob Saget, but we're also commemorating the co-hosting of Mark Pellegrino. Now, to be very clear, Mark Pellegrino is alive and well. I don't want to confuse anybody, but yeah, I would ask him. He on his hit ARCUK show, TV Talk, Mark he spoke about the Coca-Cola commercial, which marks the end of the Mad Men series, which I guess was a real TV commercial for Coca-Cola in the 70s, I guess. That is very memorable to a lot of people. It shows people from around the world in their various garbs and looks, singing about Coca-Cola together. And Mark has shared that commercial gave a taste, pardon the pun, of optimism in such a hectic time in America, with Vietnam and all that happening. So I guess I was reminded of that when trying to understand what is it about shows like Full House and those sitcoms from the 90s that meant so much to someone like me. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, also a show kind of set during troubled times. Will Smith he leaves home in Philadelphia to go stay with his Republican relatives. So they explore a lot of social issues together. And, this is, 20 years after Martin Luther King. So it's still kind of fresh. And Malcolm X, Will Smith is into Malcolm X and stuff. And now he's contending with his relatives and all of that. And he's in a new environment, going to a preppy school. So there's a lot that is sort of explored, and a lot you can sort of abstract from that. And I think there's just a general positivity you get from watching these sitcoms. And I'll repeat, I can definitely see somebody glancing or even watching these shows and thinking oh, it's superficial, it's two-dimensional. And I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying, for me, that it meant something positive and life-affirming to watch from where I was standing. And I'm reminded of Ayn Rand's book, The Romantic Manifesto. In one of the chapters, she talks about how a young boy might read the comic Buck Rogers. Now, for me, I only knew about Duck Dodgers, the Daffy Duck spoof of Buck Rogers, which again, there as well, someone might say, oh, such a spoof is nihilistic. From where I was coming from, Duck Dodgers was life-affirming, funny, and awesome. But going back to Buck Rogers in Ayn Rand's essay, Rand points out that a young boy might admire Buck Rogers, like a fictional spaceman. And the job of the adults around the boy is to kind of help him discover, what is it about this character and these stories that speak to you, and what can you abstract from them in order to kind of become your own real life Buck Rogers. That is to kind of set your own goals and pursue them and explore in your own domain, your own context. And the most monstrous thing people could do, of course, Rand points out, is to mock the kids' admiration for Buck Rogers and basically act like there's nothing to explore, nothing to discover from there. So now Buck Rogers, despite its kind of silliness, is, I think, romantic. Maybe not realism, but it is romantic art, where it's heroic, and there's kind of adventures where there's a goal and certain values are pursued and certain principles are followed. I think that's what makes it sort of romantic art, even though it's childish. Now, when it comes to a sitcom like Full House, is that romantic? I don't think it's romantic in the same way, but there's definitely problem solving. So like kind of the formula of each episode is there's a problem and they solve it. There's a problem and they solve it. They're true to their characters. They're often their characters are what gets them through. It's their kind of commitment. So you don't see like ugly cynicism. You don't see pragmatism. You don't have, part of my language, like shitty people cutting corners. You have like just very, very wholesome characters dealing with the problems and solving them and succeeding, or dealing with loss, or dealing with, mild failure in a way that is honorable. So, there is definitely values you can abstract from a show like Full House, I think. And there are ways in which it's in the neighborhood of what we could call romantic. Again, it's not high art. It's not all the art you need to get you through life, but, kind of one man's kind of comfort food art. It can be another man's or a child's sort of inspirational art, I guess. So what else is it about sitcoms that might appeal to people? I've been asking myself all morning in preparation for this episode. Like, what is it about sitcoms in particular that is so endearing to so many people? They have the laughter and or laugh tracks, which I know a lot of people can say is trashy and, fake, and it's not great television. And again, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying it in a certain context, many people might be able to get certain values from watching sitcoms. These shows tended to be shot in front of a live audience. So it was not all laugh tracks, like people would say. If you watch a show like Different Strokes, like the first season, especially, like you can hear the audience like talking to the characters or something. You hear them going like, "Oh no, oh no!" Like it's almost like a conversation the audience is having with little Arnold and Willis. There's another show, Different Strokes, another show that takes place in the aftermath of tragedy. These boys lost both their parents, and Mr. Drummond adopts them, or he takes them in and to raise them and later adopts them. And they also explore various issues surrounding race and others. Now, sadly, we'll never be able to do a commemorative show for anyone in Different Strokes unless it's Willis, because I think every other actor from that show is sadly deceased by now. So a lot of child actors faced serious troubles in life, either in their childhood, in Hollywood. And this would have been something I would like to ask Mark about if only Mark were here, but I'm sure he's in a better place. Again, to be clear, Mark is alive. I'm just using this type of language. I don't know how old Mark was when he first started working in showbiz. I'd be curious. Was he a young adult? Was he an adult? Given what he knows, would he see it as a blessing that he was not working as a child actor, if he wasn't working as a child actor? Because you hear so many stories, like just a lot of these kids were abused, a lot of are taken advantage of in some way or another, all types of horror stories. And even beyond that abuse, so many kids are maybe all kids are ill-equipped to handle that kind of success. I mean, adults have a hard time dealing with that type of success, stardom and ungodly money. So, Allison in the chat says, I was one when he became an actor, lol. I don't know if you're saying Mark was one when he became an actor, because Allison, as great as I've become at translating your comments, I don't know what this one means. I was one when he became an actor, lol. Hugh James, the delightful commenter in the chat room, says escapism. Is that really what it is? Escapism, or is it inspiration? Is it abstracting certain values? Is it seeing what's possible here in this reality of ours? So escapism sounds like that type of cynical language people use, and it doesn't surprise me. Okay, Allison says, I'm talking about Mark. Okay, I did not realize Mark was an actor at one. So it would be especially interesting to speak to him about this today because he's obviously very well adjusted and still successful well into adulthood. So it would be interesting to kind of explore the fate of so many a child actor, such as I don't know, Danny Bonaducci and the cast of Different Strokes, and I mean the list goes on. It's often very tragic to see where a lot of them end up in life. And also the rejection they have to deal with, once they get a little older and just suddenly they're completely discarded by the industry, many of them. Very sad. The Olsen twins, I think, are probably the biggest success story of any child actor. They became fashion moguls. Is that right? They have a very successful career in fashion and stuff and design, and God bless them. They had the wisdom not to return for the very unfortunate reboot of Fuller House. If you like Fuller House, we cannot hang. I'm sorry. We're just not going to be friends. If you thought Fuller House was good, I'm not going to dwell on the negative here today. We're here to discuss the positive. So Bob Saget was cast in Full House, and in many ways, I think carried that show with his wonderful presence. And during that same time, he was also creating or working on America's favorite, funniest home videos. Is that what it was called? AFV, America's Funniest Videos, or something like that. A kind of a proto YouTube type thing where you had people sending in their videos, their home videos, their kid goofing around or their pet falling down, just very silly stuff, harmless fun, and very funny for a lot of people to watch. And it was very successful. So Danny Tanner, aka Bob Saget, not only a game changer in the world of sitcoms, but also his show, America's Funniest Home Videos, was a very successful formula, proved to be a successful formula, and also proved to be kind of a promise of what was to come once the internet came around and everyone could post their home videos on something like YouTube. So a visionary is what Bob Saget was. And then, his stand-up comedy, I never really got into. I heard, let me take a sip of my coffee. I heard that, that it was vulgar and it kind of played into the whole, like, I was very wholesome on TV and here I'm swearing and being vulgar. And I thought that was very funny, but I just never really got around to watching Bob Saget stand-up. It was not as accessible to me as a kid because there was no YouTube yet. And by the time there was YouTube, I just had other things I wanted to focus on rather than Bob Saget's vulgarity. But I mean, I think maybe in my own subconscious way, I'd rather remember Bob Saget as the wholesome character rather than his goofy, vulgar stand-up self. Although I watched one of his songs that he played. I think it was called "Danny Tanner Was Not Gay" on YouTube this morning. It's a parody of the Backstreet Boys' "I Want It That Way." It's clever for sure. Nothing against it. He could have put more energy into it. He kind of sings it with kind of low energy. And, the crowd loves it. I mean, it's very successful. And, he doesn't need my validation, but I just, I think I like the Danny Tanner character. I don't need that much kind of low energy, sort of tongue-in-cheek cynicism. I mean, be tongue-in-cheek by all means, but give it energy. Like, act like you mean it. That's my philosophy when it comes to comedy. Be as sarcastic as you want, but like be high energy sarcastic. Act like you're serious. So I've seen Bob Saget singing on Full House, and I saw him singing on stage to his stand-up audience. And when he sings on Full House, he sings like he means it. He's saying "My Girl," and he's saying "Rolling Down the River," whatever that song was. I mean, he's got the energy. He chose not to use it for that song on stage. Anyway, never really got into his stand-up, but I know a lot of people love that, and I think that's great. He also he had a roast on Comedy Central, the roast of Bob Saget. Now that was funny. That I really enjoyed. And that kind of reminds me, okay, there was one joke. Now, this is not for the faint of heart. Is that the saying? This is, if you don't appreciate shocking humor, please mute this for the next 10 or 20 seconds. But one of the jokes on the roast of Bob Saget was one of the comedians said, you know, the Olsen twins wanted to be here tonight, but they heard there would be food. So that joke, I guess, was, you know, referring to the rumor or fact that one of the Olsen twins was anorexic or something like that. Obviously, very, very shocking joke, but that format, you know, that format, that the formula of that joke, I thought was very clever, and that kind of reminds me of, I mean, come with me on this chain of associations. Like eating disorders, I have heard of, you know, a number of cases where like eating disorders are often had by girls, especially more than guys, like girls who have very strict parents. Is that like a fair kind of association? So like maybe like a woman who's a judge, like her child might have like end up with an eating disorder, like in as like a way of like dealing with the unreasonable expectations of her very, very strict mother. And this kind of reminds me of how in the later seasons of Full House, Danny Tanner becomes like a clean freak. He's constantly cleaning everything, which is interesting. I think they added that on later in the show. But again, even though he's very clean and neat, he's not unreasonable. He's like, his personality is not like, he's not like religious about it. He's not dogmatic about it. And I try to be the same way. Now, something about me is I'm very particular with my environment. Everything has a place. Everything is put away all the time. You'd be hard pressed to find a mess in my home. I even, you know, I dress every day as if I'm going to go out, even if I'm not planning on going anywhere. I once had a friend remark to me, like, he said, anytime I come over, it's like stepping into a TV show. You're always dressed. You're always dressed, and everything's always clean and neat. But I've like wondered, like, is my particularity going to, like, if I have kids one day, am I going to like end up like causing them to have like psychological problems or something like that because I'm just so particular with everything being put away and stuff like that? Like, am I going to end up being unreasonable? So those are just some thoughts. I hope that made some coherent sense there. So Danny Tanner's character, you know, the Danny Tanner character, he's very, very much a clean freak, but not in a way that comes off like dogmatic and like intrinsicist, to use the objectivist vocabulary. Anyway, that is those are my thoughts. And I just wish Mark Pellegrino could be here today so that I can tell him, I never really thanked you, Mark, for all of your support during my long battle with COVID-19. All right, let's read some super chats, shall we? Marilyn with $2 says, I stopped watching TV in 1985. Can't help much. I think you've missed out. Marilyn. TV really started to pick up around that time. And especially much later in the 2000s and beyond, with premium cable, HBO and Showtime and all of that. And especially today with all the streaming services, TV today is like mini movies. It's just, there's a lot of great content, you know. And this is not directed at Marilyn, but it's directed at maybe others to whom this may apply. We may have a tendency when, like, let's say we read Ayn Rand or we listen to Ayn Rand, to think like everything Rand is saying is completely true and applies today as well, but that's not necessarily so. So I'm reminded to one of Ayn Rand's interviews or Q&As where she says like there's nothing good to watch on TV. She said, like, I watch Perry Mason and that's about it. And first of all, she may have been exaggerating in that instance, as people tend to do in extemporaneous conversation, but also, just because Rand saw the world that way at that particular stage of her life doesn't mean, let's say, a young Mark Pellegrino wasn't being inspired by a Coca-Cola commercial on TV in a way that gave him the courage to live the life that he wanted. So, look at the world first-handedly, embrace your own values, and also don't assume that the world today is the world that it was when Ayn Rand was writing and talking. She said the universities are teaching, skepticism and all of this stuff, and perhaps they still are, but maybe there's a lot more good stuff being taught in universities today. Maybe there's been an upsurge in Aristotelian appreciation in universities today. Certainly, I would say TV today is a hell of a lot more rich today in terms of what's available compared to the 1970s, for example. So, look at the world first-handedly and see what you see. You know what I'm saying? Allison with $2 says, "You got it, dude. How rude." There's another little inside joke for fans of Full House. Allison says, "I loved Full House. Rest in peace, Bob." His name is Danny. Marilyn with $2 says, "I can offer uninformed bloviation." I don't know what that word means, but thank you nonetheless. Roland with $4.99 with euros says, "Unfortunately, I haven't seen Full House. Hashtag first world problems." Yeah, and first world problems is exactly what they deal with on that show, which is a wonderful problem to have. I mean, I think I'd like to see the first world get to a place where most of those problems are solved as well. But we're going to need liberty, capitalism, reason, and a rational egoist ethics. Marilyn with $2 says, "Good advertising can be brilliant." Absolutely. I took a class on commercial acting. I remember it was like a 6-week, whatever. I don't remember if it was a 4-week. Point is, I took a class on commercial acting, and the very first day, I got up there, I played the part, and the instructor said, "No, you don't look 100% happy. Like in commercials, the world is a wonderful place, unless it's like a commercial for, depression." or I think the example the instructor used was, unless it's a commercial for an alarm company. You see someone breaking in and the people are shocked. I mean, that's the type of commercial where things are not perfect. But, most commercials, the world is a wonderful place. And is that such a bad thing? Again, you can call it trashy. You can say it's gratuitous and they're just trying to sell you some, overhyped product. You might have a point, but, is that the worst thing in the world for people to set out and depict the world as a wonderful place? I mean, in the context of all history, again, remember a short 10,000 years ago, farming was barely happening, I think, right? Is that a fair ballpark statement there? I mean, to get to a point where people have the technology and the vision to depict the world in that certain way in order to sell certain thing or to make you consider buying a certain thing. Yeah, in and what I took from that commercial acting class was that I started trying to remind myself, pretend you're in an advertisement right now, just walking down the street. Just pretend you're in that universe. Like pretend the camera's pointed right now and you're in a commercial, in order to lift up my own spirits. Is that the worst thing in the world? I don't think so. All right, Roland with €4.99 says, "I'm still rewatching many of the cartoons I saw and enjoyed as a kid." Absolutely. I got the Animaniacs collection. I started watching it, kind of, lost interest and started watching something else. But yeah, these cartoons are, again, many people can criticize them and say they're too stupid. They make kids too stupid. I'm not disagreeing. I'm not the one who invented these cartoons, or I'm not the one claiming to be an art expert or art critic. I'm just saying, here's what these cartoons meant to a lot of us growing up, especially coming out of a dark age, which is kind of how I see my upbringing. Roland again with €4.99 says, "While watching The Big Bang Theory, I often hit pause just to contemplate the sheer genius of a given joke." Oh, that's wonderful. That's a very, very successful sitcom, Big Bang Theory. I never watched it, but I think it's a record-breaking show. And I mean, yeah, isn't it wonderful that one of the most successful shows has to do with science, whether or not the Big Bang is entirely understood properly in the world, or I don't know much about the Big Bang, whether or not there was one, but But that's not what I'm here to discuss. But isn't it nice to see such an interest in science? Isn't that a good sign? Marilyn with $2 says, Bonaducci is a radio host in Seattle. He's good. And before that, he was a radio host in Cleveland. And before that, he was a radio host in LA, co-hosting with Adam Carolla on the morning radio on K-Rock. And I spoke, when I dabbled in radio, one of my coworkers who's much older told me Danny Bonaducci and his friends, they used to literally go on road trips to rehab. Like, let's say there was a rehab in Fresno. They would get in their car in LA and just like do as many drugs and alcohol as they can do by the time they get to rehab and then check in there. The guy is a train wreck. God bless him. Danny Bonaducci, I find him very funny and fun, but he's not what I would call the most successful of child actors in terms of the life skills required to live a good life. Based on what I know, based on what I've seen. All right. Jonathan with 99 cents. Thank you for that. He sent some salt. I'm not sure. Are you calling me salty? Are you saying that I have brought salt here today? Marilyn with $5 says, I was spending my life watching Cagney and Lacey's reruns, so I canceled my cable and stopped watching. I don't even know what that is, but I've heard of some other sort of older sitcoms like Three's Company. I think the oldest sitcom I have watched is Different Strokes. I mean, I've seen some episodes of like I Love Lucy and the Brady Bunch and Dynamite. Which one was that? Dynamite. Was that Moving On Up? What was it? Good Time. There was Good Times, and there was George Jefferson, Moving On Up. Anyway, yeah, I've seen some episodes of those much older shows, but I think the oldest sitcom that I watched religiously was Different Strokes, and a couple of years newer than that, or something a little newer than that, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Of course, many of us know and love that show. And of course, Full House, Family Matters, which is the Urkel show, as many of you know it. Step by Step with Suzanne Summers. Anyway, that's all the time we have today. Thank you all for joining us today. We're going to jump over to Clubhouse. See you there. Coming up today at 8 p.m. UK time, it's Reverse Engineering Happiness, the new show with Tal Tzfani and Amanda Maxim. Then at 9 p.m. UK time, it's HBTV with Harry Binswanger. And today's episode is Determinism as Self-Refuting. 10 p.m. UK time, it's Method and Madness with Don Watkins discussing Elon Musk versus Elizabeth Warren. Now that I want to see. All right, everybody. Dylan, I will message you as soon as we're ready to end the show. I'm going to take us out with a short little something here. So keep an eye on the chat room, Dylan. And rest in peace to Bob Saget. I'm going to miss you, and don't sell your dreams so soon. That's what I say. Don't sell your dreams so soon. And with that, I take us here.